Welcome, everybody, to Before the Commit, episode 22. This week, we'll be touching a little bit more on open code and brought code fast. Also, an ominous warning from Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei saying that AI is going to test us as a species. Or is it species? I don't know. And in the Kill 'em Chain, we'll talk about an interesting project coming out of the OWASP called the AI bomb generator, similar to the S-bomb generator. With me, as usual, I have my friend Dustin Hillgartner. Hey, Dustin, how's it going?
Good.
So you're saying about your keyboard?
Oh, I had a drop keyboard that I really liked that I got some time ago, and then I spilt some water on it and destroyed it. And well, we'll see if it dries out and fixes itself. But in the meantime, I need another keyboard, and I really like the clicks on this one.
Nice. Sounds good. Yeah, I had mass drop keyboards for a while, and I just used the Apple Magic Keyboard with the Touch ID baked into it. And yeah, I just like the flatness of it, and the, it's like very quiet and, thin and wireless. Yeah.
I like to be loud, but then I find myself on a podcast and I'm like, man, I can't type.
You need a separate podcast keyboard.
Yeah. If I'm on a Zoom call, I'll just be obnoxious. But if I'm on a podcast and I'm like, oh man, I can't type right now. So I might have to get that keyboard because I like to touch the fingerprint.
Well, you can just have your Moltbot set up to listen to everything you're saying on the call, and it'll just spin off an agent or skills and start doing stuff.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, we're gonna have to cover Moltbot at a future. I don't know if you heard Claudebot got a cease and desist because it sounds too much like Claude.
Mm-hmm.
So they renamed themselves overnight to Moltbot, and yeah, but it's a bit of a craze on the internet. A lot of, I haven't, I'm in the middle of setting it up right now. I haven't set it up yet, but yeah.
Yeah, me as well. And I think we're going to do a whole segment on it in a week from now on this podcast.
Cool. Awesome. Great. Before we get into the tool of the week, you actually pointed me to this article about Lemonade, the insurance company, offering a 50% discount for people who are using FSD mode on Tesla, FSD being full self-driving. I'm not a Tesla driver, but I've ridden with you before and watched you do it, even in we were in San Antonio, and we were in a highly, there's a lot of construction going on, and did just fine, like navigating around very perilous kind of setup over there in San Antonio, outside San Antonio proper. But yeah, so the deal is per mile rate cuts at 50% approximately when FSD is engaged, a low fixed parking fee and per mileage charge. Apparently they have some kind of direct connect into your car so they can actually meter or monitor that you're doing what you're saying.
Mm-hmm.
It only works on, I guess, newer Teslas, and it's available in Arizona starting yesterday, Oregon in a month from now, and then expanding to California, Texas, and Illinois. And essentially to what we said, I think it was like episode 18 or 19 about the the PhDs won't like this, but Teslas are better drivers than you.
I don't know what happened.
Yeah. Yeah, but interestingly enough, Morgan Stanley said that this is setting a precedent for other insurance companies. It's going to be, it's like more evidence-based way of underwriting insurance, which cyber insurance companies have been doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I generally put out social media that is on the topics that we talk about on the podcast. I use it as kind of a way of coming up with topics to put in my social media. And one of my posts went really viral on, well, I mean, in a small viral way, with hundreds of comments, and on LinkedIn. And it was the one where I was referring to how, I had mentioned Tesla drives better than me. It was a little bit hyperbolic, I guess. And then I had said that, humans are probabilistic, and, um, folks out there say they don't want to rely on AI because it's probabilistic. And I was like, well, you already do rely on probabilistic neural networks. It's called humans, meat computers, etc. I don't know what it was, but something was a lightning rod. I don't know. It was because I called humans meat computers, or I said Tesla drives better than me, and that's kind of like a lightning rod of a company. But man, the PhDs emptied out to argue about whether humans were probabilistic, and then the second wave of PhDs came in to defend me. And
how many hits have you gotten on this post now? Is it up to 20,000?
I mean, for me, it was a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it was like 20,000 or something like that, which I had just started doing social media posts recently based on the podcast. So that was kind of an outlier. But yeah, I mean, this is what I was saying, and I know there's a lot of folks out there who don't have a Tesla. And really, in all honesty, it's not just about Tesla. It's about the fact that all this AI stuff is coming to fruition. AI agents, Claude Code in a way is kind of like a Tesla for coding, in terms of it being an agent that takes on a task and does it for you. Obviously, it does more than coding. In fact, it's becoming more of a general agent, as you can see with Claude Cowork that came out. And ClaudeBot is in that same, or Moltbot, I guess they're calling it now, is in that same vein. It's an agent that's taking on work on your behalf, behind the scenes, 24/7, etc. And you can interact with it through a variety of ways, like on your phone through WhatsApp or Signal or Telegram or iMessage, even, and things like Slack, whatever. You're going to see more and more of these things. I think 26 is going to be the year of the application layer. So if you hear about Jensen's layers of the cake, last year was really about the models, ChatGPT, and all the other foundation models. This year is going to be about the application layer, the agents being built on top of it. You're going to start seeing them come out in all the different industries, and there's going to be agents that are doing more and more on behalf of the folks using them. So
it feels like a little bit like not quite there yet. Like, just to slightly refute that, like, it feels like we're more at the interface level, because what you're really seeing is like, I don't see ClaudeBot as a application. Like, I see it as glue, as an interface, right? Because it's talking about an orchestration mechanism. I see Claude Code as an orchestration mechanism. So I don't think we're quite there yet. I still think there's some dust settling around the interface level. Like MCP is an interface, so maybe I'm wrong about that, but it feels like people are still clamoring over real estate, over like which is the right way to interact with the model, not necessarily. Yeah, applications are being built, but the argument.
I mean, you may not be wrong.
Yeah.
Obviously, no one knows what's going to happen per se. I mean, we're trying our best to look as far in the future as possible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I disagree a little bit, but I can't say that I'm right, because I think it's just everyone's kind of making their
things are happening in parallel also, because like the model war is not really over. Like, one of the other things was announced this week was it's just like a small little anecdote. I don't know if it's like indicative of a bigger thing going on, but we've talked much here about models being commoditized. So like Anthropic actually decreased their prices for their team-based sort of packages, if you will. They reduced the number of by $5 for standard and $25 for premium. So, like you see things like, people raising prices, or, for example, last week we talked about OpenAI starting to run ads inside of ChatGPT on their free and Go models in order to, I guess, subsidize costs. So, yeah. So my point is that, like, I don't think it's over. I think it's just like the market is expanding beyond like the layers. Like the layers are kind of becoming more solidified, if you will. Like applications are certainly being built, but like this seems to be the year of the interface, in my opinion, so far.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, we may be talking about the same thing. I just call them applications, but I mean, the traditional application is a UI over a repo layer, or whatever you want to call it,
database,
CRUD on a database.
Yeah.
And I think the new application layer is going to be orchestrating models and intertwining it context-wise with your own data, your proprietary data within your application. So I think we might be saying the same thing. You're saying that this is the interface, this is the orchestration of models. I think that is the application layer. Now, maybe there will be something built on top of that even. But I think that Claude Code, Tesla, Claudebot, and a number of other things that are coming out are all what I would call the application layer. And I think that the next year will be about that. But yeah.
So I mean, to that point about the like, the whole agentic, takeover, and like, I know a little bit about, Moltbot already. It's just, a set of skills that you can execute. I have my own like thing that I built that, I can do quite a bit with, and I could extend it to do other things. Like it doesn't have the ability to, it has the ability to use Chrome MCP to do stuff. But yeah, I mean, I could send emails. But yeah, I'm curious. So anyway, like Dario Modi, CEO of Anthropic, issued yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
A funny thing I heard the other day, just because I know we're going past the topic, and just a real anecdote about the Tesla thing. I was watching videos of everyone in the winter storm that took place in the United States, and they have all these FSD videos of people trying to drive it in the ice, and it actually, like, if you can even get it to slide, it'll actually counter steer and like it'll like stop the slide and everything. So it's pretty interesting. I don't know if I'm ready for that yet, but it was pretty wild watching people do that. Now, the kind of hot take I saw that rang with me, and this is about the OpenAI with the advertising, is I was browsing, I think it was X or something like that, and I saw someone post, and they said, if you were on the verge of AGI, would you be releasing advertising onto your platform? Like, is that the move you would make? So I kind of thought about that, and I was like, yeah, if you were right on the verge of AGI, would you even be thinking about putting advertising in at this point? Like, you're about to have something superhuman, and your monetization strategy is advertising.
No one's close to AGI. I think there's like a misnomer that like LLMs are intelligent. Like LLMs are good at a few specific things. They're enhanced through web search and tool calling, which make them better, but they themselves are not AGI. Like we're some ways away from that capability, unless somebody has a time machine and went into the future and brought the technology back. Or somebody has technology and they haven't publicly released it yet. But yeah, like LLMs are not the beginning or being any closer. Well, maybe they might be a clue into AGI, but it's not. Yeah, I think people don't fundamentally understand how LLMs work, and yeah, so
Yeah, and about the topic of now to go on to the Anthropic topic and
yeah. So basically, like just to introduce it, for those that didn't read the essay, there's a 20,000 word essay called "The Adolescence of Technology." And, Anthropic, if you're not aware, is the company that puts out the Claude models, Opus and Sonnet and Haiku, um, basically saying that more powerful AI will arrive by 2027 and clusters could run millions of AI instances at superhuman speed. 50% of entry level white collar jobs could be displaced in 1 to 5 years, creating a crisis of meaning. Calls AI the single most serious national security threat in a century, describes it as a country of geniuses in a data center. Internal testing on Claude 4 Opus showed alignment faking, AI appearing to follow safety protocols during monitoring, but exhibiting deceptive behaviors when oversight was absent.
yeah. I mean, my own personal opinion about it is that Anthropic and OpenAI are very similar. They're two sides of the same coin. They're the players in the market that don't have like an unlimited bag of cash behind them, and they need to drum up headlines in order to do rounds of funding. There's a lot I agree with in terms of what the CEO is saying for Anthropic, but I think that his timelines are too aggressive, and also I think that some of the examples they've come up with in the past when they drive up these headlines have been kind of contrived, in the sense that like for instance, they had a headline not too long ago when they were saying that like Claude blackmailed one of their engineers. But if you look at the prompts they were using in order to get that effect, it was basically they spelled out that you should blackmail somebody if something happens, right? Like if you were to think this way, you should blackmail, and then it did it. So to me, I don't think that's as much of a headline as it might seem to most people if you actually looked at the thing behind it. And I think the idea behind it was to get a headline. It wasn't really to make some sort of like scientific addition to all of our knowledge. With that being said, I think they have to do that. They have to, get the next round of funding. They have to survive. And not that they're not doing well. I think they're doing probably one of the best at this point in coding for sure. So yeah, I mean, that's my take on it. I agree with him about it displacing junior engineers, but an interview I saw, actually, I think it was the CTO of Netflix, Elizabeth Stone. She appeared on a podcast, and they were asking her about why when Netflix started, they only had like very, very senior engineers. They didn't even have any junior engineers when they first started. And they didn't hire junior engineers at all. And then recently, they've started hiring a lot of junior engineers. And so they were asked about that, why they're doing that. And they basically said that they're seeing junior engineers having, more of a Gen AI, more of an AI mindset from the beginning, as opposed to a lot of some senior engineers, aren't into AI as much. So they kind of look at it as like an injection into their culture of that
Makes
new
sense.
mindset.
Yeah.
So I tend to believe that in the short term, in the long term, I think AI, does everything for us. But I think in the short term, when you see this dip in junior developers being hired, I think that will rebound, because you'll have generations of junior developers coming in who are kind of more in tune to this way of doing things with AI. They aren't bogged down by having 25 years of not doing AI in their training
it's
data.
similar to that. It's similar to like like developers that were not like using like modern software languages, or those that did not understand agile methodology. Like went through a similar thing about 15 years ago, where you saw people like, not wanting to adopt like newer languages. Maybe they learned C or they knew COBOL and didn't want to learn JavaScript or, C sharp, and, so yeah, I mean, you always have that. And it's an interesting strategy to do it. In fact, today, Pinterest announced that they were laying off 15% of their staff in order to use more AI. So like you're seeing these corrections in the marketplace around, you're able to reduce your costs potentially by just, using AI, where you might have had a human being curating things, or, having humans code, figuring out how to code a feature that might have taken months can now be done in weeks or days by a single person versus having teams of people do things. So,
absolutely. I think that there will be, in my opinion, I think there will be a temporary disruption in the labor market because a lot of companies don't know what's going to happen. So you have two things that are happening. Software companies are seeing more productivity out of their employees that use AI, which is slowing down hiring because they can do more with less. However, they are still hiring in many cases, in most cases, I would say. And then also what you're seeing is that companies are kind of pausing because they don't know what the future looks like. And that also is disrupting things. So I think that those things will resolve themselves in the short term as the future becomes more clear, as the application layer and the other layers we're talking about evolve. And it becomes more clear what the path forward looks like for a lot of these businesses. And then also, I think that when those productivity increases are come home in terms of revenue and in terms of profit, the hiring will just continue to increase in software engineering and others. And I think that in the end game one day is a totally different story. But I think I agree that the end game probably comes quicker than most people think. But I think that if you listen to these CEOs who are looking for funding and their timelines, I think that they're too aggressive.
Yeah, there's definitely like incremental corrections going on, like in the market, like cost cutting, and there'll certainly be a rise, I think, in unemployment in the short run. And I still believe that there's a bigger sort of issue going on with the whole like way that the money is flowing between the LLM providers, the data center providers, and the chip providers. And I don't think we've fully seen the full effects of that. Like, businesses being propped up. Like, it kind of reminds me of, maybe I'm wrong, but it kind of reminds me of the mortgage crisis. Like it does. Like there's just like the market feels artificially propped up by money that is just non-existent.
Maybe. I mean, I think that when things rise very quickly in terms of, if you're looking at the stock market, for instance, then the correction is going to be very sharp and deep too. So, and it's healthy for there to be a correction, because all sort of bull markets or all growth creates speculation, where people jump into that market who have no idea how it works because they see everyone else making money at it. And so what that means in the stock market is pretty simple. People buy stocks they don't understand, and they probably buy it at the top, And then the correction comes and they don't understand the business still, but now they're losing money. So they jump out and it comes tumbling down. In outside the stock market, the way that works in the real economy is what you're seeing in AI right now, where everyone's got an AI startup, everyone's, vibe coding some sort of app. That's all the speculation around, wanting to be in that industry. And it's similar to like when the internet came out and everybody was making websites. There was websites for pretty much anything you could think of, that were popping up. And I think there will be a correction, just like there was in the .com era, that kind of wipes out those players that aren't meant to stay, who are kind of carpet bagging into the industry in the hopes of making a quick dime. And I think that that's healthy. That's normal. You wouldn't want it to just continue to rise up.
Yeah, I'm not thinking too much about the, certainly there's a number of companies that are funded. Like if you look at the .com era, there was a number of companies that, like, a small percentage of them that survived, and there was a lot of money being put in, investment, venture capital. I'm talking more about at like this, the maybe necessity to meet demand of the consumption of the LLMs themselves, and like competing over, like, let's say real estate over the market. And we'll just take the four big LLMs, for example. And the need for more data centers, the need for more chips to go in the data centers, and then, whatever other operational costs are associated with delivering that to a customer, the API hosting, the running of the models themselves. And the way that market has been created and funded is not something that I think you can compare to another world other than, the housing market's not the same because it was around for a lot longer. And, people trusted it more, I guess you could say, and never thought that housing would go down. And so that the bets were made on that sort of like reality. This is something I don't think that anybody can predict. So yeah, I mean, I could be totally wrong about it, but it feels like they're like, LLMs are awesome.
Yeah.
But they're not that awesome. And a lot of the money that's in the market is around that.
I see the analogy being more the .com era as opposed to the mortgage era. My personal opinion about the mortgages is that it was a government created crisis because they were pushing banks to do subprime mortgages, and then the banks had to figure out how to package them in a way that they could securitize them, and that led to the advent of mortgage-backed securities, and then that was something that was too complicated for them to really do a risk assessment on, and it just unraveled. So I look at that as more of a political thing. Yeah.
Don't you think the government is pushing the LLM companies in a way also?
I mean, possibly.
For national security reasons, perhaps.
Yeah, but
there's a lot of DoD contracts. Like,
now listen, if all the money it was coming from DoD contracts and the government was sort of,
it's not all coming from there, but the government's given what, $500 billion for Stargate. There's a national security crisis regarding China, their competition to be ahead of them. Like, aren't we?
I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying, but the difference is that the subprime mortgages would have never happened if it wasn't for the government essentially forcing the banks to do it by saying that they wouldn't allow them to merge, which is basically the death of a bank. So it was literally like the government created that problem, in my opinion. Whereas AI, I just look at the government as a player who's trying not to fall behind and trying to leverage this new technology. And if the government didn't exist and didn't have any government, if the government tomorrow said, we're not doing AI, wouldn't even be a blip on the radar of the AI market right now. It would still grow. There'd still be hundreds of billions of dollars pumped into data centers. It's completely irrelevant to the growth of AI, whether the U.S. government takes part in it or not. So I look at them as just trying to get on the bandwagon because it's an important technology for defense and for everything. So I look at it different in that way. But I still agree with you that it's almost certainly got bubblish added concepts to it. There's probably going to be some sort of sort of come to Jesus moment on it. I personally believe that that out of the 4 or 5, whatever you want to say, players in this market that are huge, some of them aren't going to be here in a couple of years.
For sure.
I think that when some of them aren't here anymore, that will precipitate the first correction that will be probably pretty deep. But I can tell you that this is not a fad. Like
no, for sure. Not from that perspective. No. Yeah. I'm not suggesting that. I mean, if anything, like, there might be 1 or 2 or 1, or it might be sold by the government, or, it might be like your cell phone company, like there's 3 or 4 major cell phone providers. Like nobody else really breaks into that market. Occasionally you have like, your Crickets or your Boost Mobiles, but those are all just small. Like I think Boost Mobile is technically Sprint or whatever it is now. So yeah,
you could even argue that they're in like a different market to some extent.
Yeah.
Like they're not really competing with the big players. They're going after a completely different use case, a completely different user base. So yeah, but I think there's going to be less. I think usually the market consolidates into 2 or 3 players when it matures. Now maybe they buy each other up. I'm not saying there's failure. I think that it's just going to consolidate in some way. But yeah,
if you think about it, like the consumption of like an LLM is like directly correlated to like electricity consumption, or like similar to like we've talked about this before about like how your ISP, like, you get your telephone, or, if you have a telephone, but you get your, your television and your internet access. Like this could just be part of that like model. And maybe it's like another layer on top of it. Like that, like you are not buying directly from the LLM, but like the LLM providers start to, kind of farm out that to other companies that are selling it. So maybe you don't buy it directly from the LLM, but you buy it through, the same way, like you might even buy your cell phone plan. Like you also get bundled streaming services along with it. And like, it might be sold like that at some point.
That may be another good analog for this is the TCOM market, because there's a lot of investment in infrastructure, and then it ended up that some of that infrastructure wasn't necessary. And then it also saddled the industry with a lot of debt that they had to pay off over the course of, the next decade, which is why, in many cases, our networks aren't as great as some of the folks who skipped the first or 2 generations and only built their network after, 5G was out or something like that. So the TCOM bubble might be another analog, a similar circumstance. And by the way, you'll probably see this in every major innovation. You see some sort of like .com or TCOM bust. There's always one of those that happens. And it's because of the speculative nature of everyone jumping on the bandwagon. And then when the speculators get like slaughtered, then the market kind of like, it becomes more sane because people realize, okay, I've actually got to have something real to do this. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens. And I have my own personal opinions that I may or may not be right about, But yeah, I think that it also made it also interesting to see all the different strategies they have, like XAI and Elon's different companies. I think they're planning data centers in space. That could be an interesting concept, because when you're building data centers on Earth, you're going to run into people who are going to be upset about the electricity prices. Then you have companies that are actually building power plants on their data centers, which is an interesting strategy. So they're going to be able to sell things back in the grid. They might actually get positive public opinion from that.
Yeah, there's also like
the prices.
There's also like ethical and moral like concerns around like, as a result of the output of the data centers, like depending upon like on Earth, like what planetary resources you're using. Like every time you go into an LLM and your Claude code command, like there's a carbon effect to what we're doing, like on a scale that has never been seen before. And like consumption is only going to increase. So like there's probably like a per token like coefficient on the effect on the environment. I say that not because it's funny, but like to your point about like the need for like sustainability, like environmental sustainability, as a result of that. Like, it's taking up, space on the planet. Maybe that's not so much of a concern, but yeah, the usage of natural resources and like the byproduct of that is not something to kind of sneeze over.
Yeah, I mean, something like 60-70% of the United States is like parks and undeveloped. So
Yeah.
I don't know if it's necessarily that there isn't the land for
No,
some
no,
of this
no.
stuff,
But it depends where. Yeah, like
Mhm.
yeah.
It's just that, they tend to build it in the areas they can build, and those tend to be by somebody.
Mhm.
But yeah, it might take, sort of political action to open up areas. I mean, I don't know. I think there's a lot of innovation that can take place that can solve these problems. But one thing I thought about earlier was one thing that could precipitate kind of like a TCOM crash in the AI market is if someone invents a way of drastically reducing the amount of power in GPUs that's necessary in order to do AI. In which case
Yeah.
people would be like, oh wow, we bought too many CPUs and too much of a data center.
Yeah.
Now, given the scaling laws and everything that folks say, may or may not hold true in AI, maybe that would just get gobbled up by the fact that they would just double the effectiveness or quality of the AI overnight, and they would say, we still need more GPUs and
Well,
et
I mean,
cetera.
if you think about it, like, what is it, like 30 years ago, we were on, or 20 years ago, like the only way to access the internet was over dial-up. Nobody could conceive like where we would be now, like that you have a phone in your pocket that could access the internet,
Yeah.
like a visual internet, not like a, Netscape navigator. You know what I'm saying? Like, so like, absolutely. Like, that Moore's law is like broken and like in a good way. And, so yeah, I don't doubt that there'll be breakthroughs in science and technology that will allow perhaps of a different type of chip. I mean, you see TPUs, Google's TPUs, tensor
Yeah.
processing units. There was a report in the news this week. Microsoft unveiled their Maya 200 AI chip,
Mm-hmm.
which is, Microsoft used to be in the hardware game. I mean, uh, they do have Xbox, but like for the most part, Microsoft, you know, the Zune, I guess you could say. They used to make like keyboards and mice, but for the most part, Microsoft doesn't really, they have the Surface, but that's just their brand. It's not their hardware per se. So they're getting into the game, they're competing directly with Amazon's Trainium chip, Google's TPU, NVIDIA. It went live this week in Iowa, Arizona next, and it's being used to run um, OpenAI's GPT 5.2 and Microsoft 365 Copilot, which is essentially that, but also I think that Copilot also allows for running Anthropic models as of late. So yeah.
Microsoft's kind of like the 800-pound gorilla that got locked out of the
And apparently
gorilla party. They're trying to get in.
It runs at a lower wattage. So there's efficiencies like NVIDIA's chips run at 1200 watts and Microsoft runs at 750. So apparently it's more performant and it runs at less power.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's definitely like an arms race for sure with the AI chips. No one, certainly NVIDIA has like a big, I mean, look at what Intel had, like, 10 years ago, Intel ruled the market. And now like, Apple's got their own chips and, AMD is sort of taken over Intel and most people are using ARM chips anyway now. And I'm sure there'll be something different not too long from now.
Yeah.
I mean, the CPU inside of my iPhone 17 or whatever I have, like, think about what that does compared to like what your 286 did that ran, Leisure Suit Larry or King's Quest, 20 years ago.
Wing Commander.
Yeah, Tetris, whatever games, Pharaoh's Tomb and Commander Keen. And
I'd have to put in like 84 floppy disks to install like Indiana Jones.
Those were the days, man. Oh yeah, I miss those days.
Yeah,
my dad and I used to go to these conferences, like computer shows, where you would have like, you could get stuff, but they always had these like vendors that would have shareware, right? Where you could like, man, you discover all these like great
that was
games.
That was the first free trial.
Yes, yeah. But I mean, some of the shareware stuff was great. I mean, you could play, Wolfenstein and Doom, a couple levels for free.
And then the internet came out with dial-up, and you'd be dialing to your friend's computer to play Duke Nukem, and his mom would pick up the phone. Hello? And you'd hear it through your modem. Yes. You'd hear a hello.
It's too late. Too late.
How far we've come, right?
Yeah, I mean, people will be laughing about this podcast, like, 6 months from now.
A lot of grandpas.
Yeah. Things are just moving so fast. Like, even like the other day, like I opened X and like I saw all this stuff about Claudebot, now Moltbot. And it was just like, it's so exciting. Like every moment there's another thing that's coming out. And it's like, it's just an exciting time to be in our industry because there's so much disruption happening every single day. Like just all these killer tools coming out.
I don't like the name Maltbot.
Yeah, me neither. Yeah, me neither. It's a terrible name.
Isn't their logo like a lobster or something?
Yes.
Why not Lobsterbot or something? Like even that's better than Maltbot. I would have, I'm not a big fan of Malt. It's hard to say, Maltbot.
Yeah, it's a terrible name.
But yeah, it's really getting a lot of press recently, so it's definitely.
Yeah, apparently the name of the lobster is Multi. And
Multi.
He built the bot. He built himself. Yeah.
There's some lore.
Yeah. Yeah, this guy Peter Steinberger is the creator of it. And he just did it for fun, and now I think he's a little bit overwhelmed. He wasn't expecting it to be under such criticism for security reasons. Anyway, we'll cover it next week.
Yeah.
But yeah, why don't we touch on we got a couple more things to hit before we close out. We have a little follow-up, I think, to Open Code and Grok Code Fast.
Yeah, so I started evaluating Open Code 2 weeks ago, and that got me back into Grok Code Fast because I hadn't messed around with Grok Code Fast since Cursor and messing around with that, and I've kind of just abandoned Cursor at this point. Which I should probably reevaluate Cursor just to be fair at some point, but yeah. So I had some time to really put Open Code and Grok Code Fast, and even used Anthropic models in OpenCode just to see the difference. And I can say that I'm super duper impressed by OpenCode. First off, their UI is, in my opinion, superior to Claude Code. Although Claude Code is starting to fix some of the bugs, like the flicker they finally got rid of. Finally they got rid of the flicker.
Yeah.
But what I will say about OpenCode is it is awesome. It's got some features that are pretty cool. However, I still find, in my opinion, I would call it probably maybe 3 to 6 months behind Claude Code. Maybe 3 or 4 months is more accurate, because it has a lot of the things that used to annoy me about Claude Code, or I should say a few of the things that used to annoy me about Claude Code. One of them being the biggest is that it gets trapped in any type of bash command it does that doesn't exit at the end. So you'll end up having to interrupt your whole flow if it does like an npm run dev or something like that, which I'm certain is probably pretty easy for them to fix and will be fixed at some point. So I would call it like probably some months behind Claude Code. So I still use Claude Code. I haven't switched over to OpenCode, but I like the prospects of switching to OpenCode at some point when I feel like they've either passed Claude Code or at least matched Claude Code. Claude Code has a lot of really great features that have come out recently that have also just continued to set the pace. Like, it's not all that common that a leader is able to continue just setting the pace. They have skills. They have skills have really started to take off. Sub agents is pretty cool. Commands are pretty cool. They just added tasks, which is in replacement of their to-dos, and it's based on a concept called beans, I believe it's called. I have to say that the tasks are really great. It kind of reminds me a little bit of like Ralph Wiggum, but not entirely. I mean, the theory behind Ralph Wiggum we've talked about in a previous episode is different, but these tasks, they run for much longer, right? Like it'll get through like 20 some odd tasks. So there's something going on there where they've probably started to think about how to get longer running tasks done. So I see Claude Code, even without Wiggum loops, running much longer than they did before. So that's awesome. And the tasks are pretty cool.
Yeah.
The planning mode has gotten better, etc. So I think that Claude Code continues to set the pace, but OpenCode has got, a fire under their belly. And considering, I don't think that they've been.
There's no real moat there, just that they're ahead.
I would imagine an open source project will probably pass Claude Code at some point, just because their engineers are limited and, probably also are focused on many different directions as opposed to just their coding agent. And then as far as Grok Code Fast goes, oh my God, is it fast? But I would put it one generation behind Sonnet 4.5. Now, Grok Code Fast, I don't think has, ever claimed to be better than Opus or anything like that in any of the charts. I think even Elon Musk in an X post recently acknowledged the fact that Grok Code is behind Anthropic and praised Anthropic for how well they're doing in coding. Anthropic banned XAI from using Claude.
Which is a good idea.
Which is a good idea, but also probably a double-edged sword because it's going to make Grok get really good at coding soon. Probably because they got to use their own coding tools. And XAI is definitely going into the application layer. They're building game studios. They're building, whatever macro hard is. I have to look into that and figure out what it is.
It's a play on Microsoft.
I know it's got a whole building and
It's
everything.
it's a whole software company that uses
Yeah.
AI to build software. Yeah.
Yeah. So apparently they're banned from using Claude, or maybe MacroHard isn't. I'm not sure, but they're going to start using their own models. So I look forward to seeing Grok Code Fast get as fast as
So it's
Opus,
like,
or as good as
they have
Opus.
like do they have like a spreadsheet like thing that called Exceed? And like, I'm
and
trying to think of the opposite of PowerPoint.
weak, dull.
If somebody has an idea for PowerPoint, put it in the comments.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't even know.
Yeah, I just
But yeah,
destroyed our frame of thought.
yeah.
But yeah, so XAI can't use Claude anymore. So they're, I guess, hopefully going to focus on coming out with the next coding model. I mean, as far as I know, they have the biggest data centers with the most coherent GPUs. So I'm just waiting for XAI to come out with a model that passes Opus. But Anthropic has just been, rocking on all cylinders. They're doing more with less.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they come out with I'm assuming they're going to come out with their own command line tool, like, since they can't use Claude Code, I'm imagining that they will come out with their own coding tool as of a necessity. They'll need something. So,
yeah, I go back and forth because I was talking in the last episode about how XAI giving away for free Grok Code Fast for quite some time led to players like Kilo Code and Open Code to probably sort of lend themselves more to Grok Code Fast in terms of fine tuning the tools and everything like that. Perhaps, I'm not sure. But the more and more I work with AI, the more and more I believe vertical integration is so important, because you need to build precisely, you need to have precisely what you want. Engineers are kind of stuck in this lens of like the build versus buy, of like, don't spend time building something that's not in your IP. But I really would suggest that people reinvestigate that, because the ability to build some of your dependencies and vertically integrate with AI is just never been like it was in the past, when you had to spend months and months building it. So
yeah.
And then the use cases you can open up when you control the entire stack, it really opens up some very innovative use cases and features.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see, GPT-6 and Grok 5 and Claude 5 and Gemini 4 really soon, and it'll be interesting to see what all those things look like, and how they try to outpace each other. And certainly there'll be new tools coming soon.
I just looked on the web to see what the latest Grok model is, and they just released Grok 420. What is the matter? What is with it? Oh my god.
Oh god. All right. Yeah. So before we close out, in the Killam chain, if you're familiar, there's a organization called OWASP. They're like an open source, security focused organization, nonprofit organization. They have a famous thing called the OWASP Top 10, which is basically a list of the highly vulnerable web vulnerabilities that are out there. They've been doing that for a long time. There's now one for LLMs. So a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in the past kind of came from there. Anyway, they have this tool that they released called an OWASP A-bomb generator, and essentially extracts metadata from Hugging Face models. It's part of the Gen AI security project. It basically tracks how it basically tracks kind of like what's inside of the AI model. So
Mm.
like Hugging Face models can like kind of align themselves to how the model was built for transparency, which I think is a good idea and can
Yeah.
kind of give like some level of like, say like models are still probabilistic, but you could at least understand a little bit how the model was trained. Um, so yeah,
Yeah. I wish I understood a little bit more about what that is. I'll have to dig into it. Do you happen to know what kind of metadata they can extract?
yeah. So uh, there is a generator on Hugging Face website, an open source tool for models hosted on Hugging Face. It automatically extracts formats key information about AI models into standard machine readable software bill of materials using
Mm.
the Cyclone DX JSON format. Because metadata quality varies across models and much of the information is unstructured, the tool analyzes what is available and organized in a consistent structure.
Yeah. Provides an AI bomb completeness score that evaluates how well the model is documented. This helps users quickly understand documentation gaps and supports transparency, security, and compliance. It's interesting. So it's kind of like an SBOM, but for AI models.
Yep,
Um,
exactly. Now, it could expand in the future to require a certain level of documentation so you can use it as a scoring mechanism to say, hey, there's a lack of documentation or transparency around this model. So you need to improve it or we won't use it. So AI bombs become then critical for maintaining trust, accountability, and control how over AI technologies are developed, integrated, and deployed.
mm,
And I'll put
that's
a
pretty
link to
cool.
the Hugging Face.
If you think about it in many ways, like that's what's missing from AI is that it's very black box, you know? Um, you really do need the equivalent of an SBOM to kind of help you understand like what's inside of it. We've talked before about whether open weights is the same as open sourcing a model. And you know, it's tough because you really need to see all of the layers of training. You need to see the data. You need to see what kind of mid-level training techniques they've done. You need to see the reinforcement learning they've done. Um, and then even if you could, right, your ability to understand the ramifications of all of those things is probably lacking unless you're on that research team or that AI lab. Um, so yeah, it's a great space to be in. Probably is the digging into models in for the purposes of helping understand what's in them and from the security perspective. They also talk about ethics in there too,
Yeah.
ethical risks. So
Yeah. And I also think that there's something around like, um, like models that derive from other models. Like if you
mhm,
fork a model, like what was the original model you forked from? Because you could
yeah,
take any one of these Hugging Face models and you can pull it down and do something to it. And now it's a derivative of that. So there is definitely like a
mhm.
supply chain relationship to how these models are used as well.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Yeah, it's not necessarily clear, from right away. And you should be able to ask the model too, like, like, give me your S bomb.
Yeah,
Like, is it built into it? I don't know. Maybe it shouldn't be. Maybe it should be detached.
tell me what you're gonna do unethical.
Yeah. Well, also, like, what about simulating? Like,
Yeah.
and you kind of simulate what might happen, like to some extent, before you actually do something. I don't know. There's definitely a lot in the security realm that's lacking in these LLMs. Like a lot of the stuff I see on Claude Bot today or Moltbot today was around the risks related to network and application security. But nobody was fundamentally talking about like the fact that this thing has full control over your machine and can hallucinate and like it's probabilistic. Like there's no real focus on that like in the industry around models. Like it's just around like, oh, you know, it's a command and control, you know, like that kind of stuff, you know, API keys and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll talk more about Moltbot next week, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. Well, everybody, thanks for joining. We'll see you next week on episode 23 of Before the Commit. Take care.